3 case studies of women composers. Please help me welcome her.
So much for staying. I know you're probably very tired and need to go home soon. I'm very glad to perform here and also to present this little research I made about women composers, because I'm from Chile and I grew up not knowing any music by women composers. It's kind of hard because due to different contexts and like historical events, this music is hard to find. So you really need to know the people or like know the heirs of the composers, or like just go into a library and just dig up into the repertoire. But this is what I've done so far, and I wanted to make a point about these 3 women composers. They all live in the 20th century, but they had different contexts, and not all of them live in Chile. For example, Carmela Mackenna made her career in Berlin, but the other ones also dedicated more to pedagogy and like to collaborative piano, which is something that I do too. But also they dedicated a little bit of time, the little time they had, to compose too. So yeah, this is my research, and thank you for being here. This is the outline of the lecture recital. I'm going to talk briefly about the historical context in Chile, so you can understand how these composers developed in that era, and also the little biographies of these 3 composers. And then I'm going to perform some short music by them. So the historical context is very important to understand how these composers could develop or not develop fully a career as a composer, because the creation of the Chilean Conservatory in the 1800s were towards conservatory training. So it was more about performing. But then in the 20th century, there was a reformation in 1928. And that reformation to the conservatory allowed certain people to take power over the institution and change a little bit how they wanted to train musicians in Chile. Because as I said, the conservatory was made for musicians, for professional musicians, but more for performers, and also for people who will become teachers in schools. Because also we were developing an education system also for children, as you know, trying to professionalize music, and they needed a lot of teachers. So that was like the main point of the conservatory, the creation of the conservatory. But then, So then when this reformation happened, Domingo Santa Cruz, which is a very important composer in Chile, he wasn't a composer by career. He studied like independently. He was a lawyer, but he was the main character in the story of the Reformation, and he changed everything in 1929. So all the people that were like teaching, like composer Enrique Soro, who was very well known, they were all fired or removed from the conservatory because they wanted to have a Chilean school of composition, develop a Chilean composition style. But ironically, all the foundations of the composition ideas Santa Cruz and others had were influenced. They were influenced by German composers. So we have Alfonso Len, which was also another very important composer from Chile. He was German, and he would create romantic music. But in Santa Cruz view, that was like what as Chileans needed. Like we needed to learn from Wagner, from Mahler, from Schoenberg, that kind of the new school of Vienna. That was the influences of these composers. So everyone who was outside of this were like kind of censored in a way. They didn't have spaces to perform. They didn't have like music published. It was very difficult to get music published. So this is the context in where these composers lived and developed. So musicologist Luis Merino from Chile, he wanted that there was a Chilean canon. And this Chilean canon, ironically, has romantic music, folk music, and also more atonal music, But all these composers that were outside this canon were not included as like good composers or like representatives of the Chilean style. But he pointed out that the creation of the work, the production, and the circulation, and also the performance, and how people receive this music, all of these form part of the Chilean canon. So it's kind of funny because if you belong to the Universidad de Chile Conservatory, this new institution after the Reformation, you could get a reception of your work because you were known by these people and they would write articles, and also they created a journal and they would write about these composers. So all of the other ones were left out. So in this context, we have the first woman composer graduated from an institution in Chile. It's María Luisa Sepúlveda, and she was one of these people removed from after the Reformation. She was a piano teacher and also was the first composer graduating from the conservatory. But after being removed, she had to find means to survive as a musician. So she dedicated more to pedagogy, also to the composition of folk music. She wrote for guitar, for harp, and piano too, but not too much because she didn't have people to perform her music. She didn't have an orchestra to perform her music. She founded the orchestra by women, but that was more for educational purposes. This is a very interesting figure in Chile because, like maybe 5 years ago, no one knew about this composer, but she has a very historical, important place in the history of Chile. So one of her pieces that I could recollect, because we don't know exactly how many pieces she composed due to the lack of research, is a lot of Chilean tonadas, the folk songs, guitar pieces, some piano pieces. I'm going to perform a couple of them, some etudes and songs. The next composer is Estela Cabezas. She mainly developed as a collaborative pianist and a teacher, but I know the granddaughter and the daughter of Estela Cabezas, and they told me she was more a dedicated mother. So she put everything like behind her mother, her maternal duties, but she wrote some music for piano. She has 3 piano etudes. They are very difficult, and you can see the technique of her because she was accompanied a lot in the Conservatory of the University of Chile. She's more contemporary, but her style is a blend of romantic and impressionist music and a little bit of jazz too. Also, she's very fan of improvisation, so in the piano etudes you can find some improvisation and like free form pieces that you can find in the etudes. But she was mostly recognized as a pedagogue because she created a method to teach children at school. So this is like a program that you can develop in a big classroom, not like one-on-one. It's like for groups of people. And that method now is developed by her daughter, and she's been presenting that book about pedagogy, and they teach how to learn music and how to recognize sounds and colors. And that method is called music in colors. But she studied with the main composers of the Chilean Canon, so she got the formation, her education in Chile. This is her pieces. I'm going to perform 2 pieces by her children's scenes for piano. They're not that easy. Probably she was inspired by children, but it was not created for children. It's like Schumann's Kindersingen. They're not that easy for beginners, but they're inspired on child. The other composer that I find very interesting is Carmela Mackenna, because she belonged to a different class. So she was at the end of the 19th century. She was born there, and she took lessons with one of the former teachers of the conservatory, Bino Paoli, an Italian teacher. But she was born not to work. She was an aristocrat. Her family was very well known in Chile. They were like senators and very important people. So she didn't study anything professionally due to her social status. But she moved to Berlin in Germany because she married a diplomat and they were traveling. So she visited many countries, and if you see the manuscripts, you can see places like Uruguay, like New York, France, where she was traveling and composing a little bit there. She was also a very fine pianist. She would perform Beethoven Appassionata in one of these private circles for aristocrat people. But then she moved to Germany and she got to study with Konrad and Sorge and Hans Mersmann. Konrad and Sorge was a disciple of Liszt. So yeah, so she studied with a very well-known teacher at that time in Germany. She wrote preludes for piano. She wrote a concerto for chamber orchestra and for piano, masses, sonatas for violin and piano, a string quartet, and around 20 songs. And she got performing her music got performed in Germany quite a lot. Like pianist Claudio Arrau, the great Chilean pianist we have, he had some manuscripts of Carmela Mackenna's music. And also she got recognition in Germany by being performed in a competition for choral music. She got performed there. Her music got performed there. She got an honorable mention in that competition. And I'm going to perform some pieces by all of them, but it's very interesting that all lives were crossed about this Chilean system of music, or the Chilean canon, that people couldn't enter to that. So it was very difficult for them to be recognized as composers like María Luisa Sepúlveda, the first one, that she graduated from an institution. She was censored many times because she was fired from the same person that made the Reformation. So even she tried very hard to be again in the system, like this was not fair. They would be like, no, you're rejected, or like very ignored. And in the critics, they would criticize her a lot, like in these magazines about composers, they would say that her music wasn't serious, that it wasn't like interesting, that also this prejudice against folk music that only worked for some people, but for other composers that were inside the canon, they were recognized for like bring in the folk music and transform this music, blending with European influences. So it's kind of like ironic if you see the principles of the Chilean canon, because it's just made for a certain group of people. And of course, women in the 20th century didn't have like much representation in the composer work or job. So yeah, it's kind of ironic of that. And also Carmela Mackenna, that got to perform in Berlin and got to be performing in Berlin, like she wasn't recognized for being a foreign kind of composer. Like, yeah, her music's kind of funny, not being taken seriously, even though if you hear her music, it sounds a little bit like Hindemith. She had a lot of European influences, but probably not in the way these people were looking for Chilean values in music. So I'm going to perform a prelude for piano. This is a cycle of 6 preludes, and this is the first one by Carmela Mackenna. many years ago, because they don't exist anymore, there were sharpening objects like knives. So this person would like wander on the streets, like, and with like a sound doing this kind of like. So he would be selling like, hey, sharpen your knife for cooking, for working class people. So he was wandering at any moment during the day, and you could hear that sound. Oh, the sharpener is coming. Okay, go get a service from him. But yeah, María Luisa Sepúlveda was inspired by these characters from Chilean society, from the streets, and from what she saw during her life. And the other one is playing bells, and it's a very Debussyan piece. You will see, and it's inspired by bells. was called Slide Bells. It was called Mi Amigo Oriental, which is my Asian friend, because she was trying to probably depict people in this album. And the other one is called Something Serious. So much for coming, and thank you for staying.